This is Mr. Alexander, and today I want to talk to you about solving for x in quadratics. Last time, my last video, I was talking about factoring, solving by factoring. Today I want to talk about completing the square and the quadratic formula. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have 3 things in your toolbox that you can use to solve any quadratic. Now, not every one of these techniques is going to be appropriate in every situation, but it's important to have all 3 in your toolbox so that you can use them as you need them. So, we gave you some homework here, like a little puzzle, and I just thought I'd maybe solve a couple of these so that I can show you what I'm talking about. So I want to start with number 2 right here. This 5x plus 7 squared equals 5. And to solve for x here, what we need to do is first get rid of this 5 in front. Divide both sides by 5. When you do that, these 5's cancel out, giving you x plus 7 squared equals, well, 5 divided by 5, that's just 1. And if I want to get rid of a square, the opposite of a square, an exponent of 2, is to take a square root. X plus 7 squared equals square root of 1. Well, these 2 things cancel out, the square and the square root, and that just leaves me with x plus 7. Now, the square root of 1, you might be tempted to say, is just 1, but it's not. It's positive and negative 1. Whenever you take a square root, you've got a positive and a negative. So we actually, in the course of taking that square root, wrote 2 equations. X plus 7 equals 1, and x plus 7 equals negative 1. Now if we solve those both for x, we'll be in good shape. Minus 7, minus 7, minus 7, minus 7. So one of the 2 solutions is x equals negative 6, and the other one is x equals negative 8. So on this puzzle thing here, that would be this one, C. So I guess you would cross off the C here. That's an example of how completing the square can be used to solve quadratics. So this one was already in vertex form. Some of them aren't. Like, for instance, let's just talk about number 7 here. This guy, number 7. So number 7, the equation is x squared minus 18x plus 81 equals 24. Now, when you're completing the square, the first thing I like to do is write some parentheses here. X squared minus 18x plus something. Put that plus 81 on the outside. And then since we added something, we're going to need to subtract something, and all of that equals 24. Let me zoom in a little bit. The question is, what is that something? What's that blank right there? And the way you find that, you take half of negative 18, which is negative 9, and square it. Okay, so half of negative 18 is negative 9. Squared is 81. So you add 81, you subtract 81. Now this thing right here, that's a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to go ahead and say x minus 9, because half of negative 18 is negative 9, squared, and then plus 81 minus 81. Those things are just going to cancel each other out. So that's 0 equals 24. All right, well, this is shaping up to be okay. So I need to take the square root to get rid of a square. So I'll go ahead and do that. Square root, x minus 9 squared, oh, but I got rid of the square, didn't I, because I took the square root, equals the square root of 24. But what is the square root of 24? It's not pretty. Let's see, to make a 24, that's 4 times 8, or even better than that would be 8 times 3. And then to make an 8, that's 4 times 2 times 3. Right? 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24. So you can reduce this to x minus 9 equals the square root, when you take the square root of 4, that's just 2. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So that's 2 root 6. Don't forget your positive and negative because we took a square root. So we've got an equation here now. And two equations, actually. X minus 9 equals 2 root 6. And x minus 9 equals negative 2 root 6. Zoom in a little bit. So I just need to solve these both for x by adding 9. Plus 9, plus 9, plus 9, plus 9. So the solution here is x equals 9 plus and minus 2 root 6. And 9 plus and minus 2 root 6, of course, is the answer choice up here, t. So you would just go ahead and cross off t. So that's how you're going to use completing the square to solve some of these problems. On the back sheet here, it says, solve each equation below using any method, show your work. Now, I'm about to show you the quadratic formula, but sometimes you don't need to use the quadratic formula or completing the square. Sometimes it's easier to just go ahead and factor. Like on number 1 here, this is really easy to just write as in the factored form. This is simply x plus 1, x plus 3 equals 0. So the solutions are negative 1 and negative 3. I just look at that and I know that. Same thing here. The 10 is just 5 times 2. So if we do x minus 2, x minus 5 equals 0. Negative 2 and negative 5, when you add them together, is negative 7. So sometimes it's easier to just go ahead and factor. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes, like an 8 through 11, you're going to have to use a different technique. Now you can try and complete the square here, but it ain't going to be pretty. I don't recommend it. On these 4, definitely these 4, I'd recommend using the quadratic formula. So let's talk about the quadratic formula, the third thing in our toolbox. Quadratic formula, and this is something you should definitely memorize. There's no person in Algebra 2 who should ever leave Algebra 2 without knowing the quadratic formula by heart. X equals negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This only works when the quadratic's in standard form, meaning ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. If the quadratic's in this form, and you can identify the a, the b, and the c, then you can use the quadratic formula. For instance, number 10, the homework on the back page. That formula is in standard form. It's 3x squared plus 5x plus 1 equals 0. Now what I like to do, before I do anything else, is I like to identify the a, the b, and the c. So the a equals the number in front of the x squared. That's just your 3. Your b equals what's in front of the x. It's just a 5. And your c equals, that's just a 1. So we just plug this stuff right into the formula. X equals negative b, which is negative 5, plus and minus the square root of 5 squared, because b squared, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 1. And all of that is divided by 2 times a, which is 2 times 3. Okay? So now we need to simplify this thing. So x equals negative 5 plus and minus 5 squared is just 25. Minus 4 times 3 times 1, that's 12. All divided by 2 times 3, that's 6. Okay, so x equals negative 5 plus and minus the square root, 25 minus 12, well, that's just 13, all over 6. Now that's a pretty ugly number, but believe it or not, that's the exact solution, the two exact solutions to this quadratic. And if you look at the homework here, you'll see that one is this choice right here, this ath. So you're supposed to cross off that box. It's gone. I wanted to show maybe one more like that. So maybe now number 7 here looks like you might be able to factor it. Those are nice, pretty numbers. So you think of the factors of -7. That's just -7 and 1 and +7 and -1. Those aren't going to add up to 3. You're not going to be able to factor this thing. We're going to have to use the quadratic formula. Or you could try and complete the square. But when you try and complete the square on this thing, think about taking half of 3 and then squaring it. So half of 3 is 3 over 2 squared. It's just going to be, you know, they're not real pretty numbers. It might be easier to just try and complete the square. Or sorry, to use a quadratic formula here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do x squared plus 3x minus 7 equals 0. So identify your A, your B, your C. A equals, B equals, equals. Your A is 1 because 1 is in front of the x squared. Your B is 3 because that's in front of the x. Your C is -7. So that's the number right before the equal sign. And we're just going to plug it right into the quadratic formula. So you start with -b, -3, plus and minus the square root of b squared, that's 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is -7. All divided by 2 times a, or 2 times 1. -b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Memorize it. And then simplify. -3 plus and minus the square root, 3 squared is 9, minus -4 times -7, well that's just positive 28, all divided by 2. All right. -3 plus and minus the square root, 3 plus 28 is 37. You can do all that divided by 2. Now, there's not really any more simplification we can do here. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do with the square root of 37? 37 is a prime number. There's not much you're going to be able to do with it. I guess you could do -3 divided by 2 and the square root of 37 divided by 2. That's not going to do much for you. This is the exact answer. These are the two solutions to this quadratic. This is where this graph crosses the x-axis. So, on the sheet here, which one is that? That's this ick. I guess you cross off ick. And that's how you're going to use the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. Solve for x, get the x by itself. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.